In the track record so far of people making requests for movies, usually it's a bunch of shit that I have to slog through. But not in this case. I fucking love this movie. Alright, look, the slasher subgenre is probably my favorite, overall. I grew up loving horror films, had my start with The Exorcist, Rosemary's Baby, and things of that cloth. Eventually saw Psycho, then Silence of the Lambs, and other films that were deemed thrillers by the Academy, but by the time I stumbled onto a little old franchise by the name of Friday the 13th, I knew what this stuff was. This was the world of slasher films, and I liked it. Yes sir, I did. Behind the Mask, The Rise of Leslie Vernon was a breath of fresh air into the slasher genre in 2006. Definitely a standout film for the subgenre, and one I've been meaning to cover for quite some time, ever since I started the show. Now, I'm not going to get long-winded here, I'm just going to go straight to the point. It seems like when a studio feels as if a franchise is getting stale, particularly of the horror genre, they send the character to space. Now, this has happened with Leprechaun, this has happened with Jason, this has even happened with Hellraiser, and not exactly with satisfactory results.
Everybody thinks we just wake up one morning and start obsessing about a girl and start stalking her, killing everybody that gets in the way.
That does seem to happen a lot with you guys.
Now, I happen to be a pretty big fan of mockumentary type shit. I can quote the Trailer Park Boys practically verbatim, so when I heard about a slasher film done in this sort of mockumentary comedy-esque format, I wondered if that was really the right step for the subgenre. And yeah, it really was. I can't explain why it works, but it just does. I mean, this didn't exactly take off as its own subgenre or anything, and maybe that's a good thing, because if you look at the found footage stuff, that really became oversaturated. So maybe it's good that we have just this one really solid mockumentary slasher/comedy film. There's something intriguing about a documentary film crew following around the exploits of a local masked serial killer, interviewing him about his past and his motives and inspirations. It just works.
You have no idea how much cardio I have to do. It's ridiculous.
Behind the Mask takes place in a world where slashers are real. Within this timeline there exists Jason, Michael, and Freddy. Even the sorority house and slumber party massacre killers are given some mention. It seems to be all about crafting the legend, leaving behind a legacy of fear that becomes a curse on the town that the killer makes their name in. One such serial killer in the small town of Glen Echo wants to do just that, and his name is Leslie Vernon. He wants to be the next big dog, the next Crystal Lake Killer or Springwood Slasher. He wants his town to feel the same level of fear as Haddonfield does every time Halloween rolls around, and he's decided to give the inside scoop to a small documentary film crew on just exactly how he plans to do it.
This is the fun stuff. Copperfield, Houdini, sleight of hand, escape tactics. You want to see a magic trick?
He religiously reads books on anatomy and escapism. He works out like an animal for both strength and insane cardio, and he believes that every great serial killer follows a strict, step-by-step code. The anchor. You establish your legend in the town, the backstory, the motivation. Leslie Vernon's story is similar to that of old Jason's, only Leslie murdered his own mother after years of being treated like a slave on their family farm, forced to work the apple orchard with nothing but a small hand scythe. The townspeople caught wind of his evil deeds and tossed him down an icy waterfall to his supposed death. Choosing your targets wisely. They mustn't be too sporty or too popular or too sloppy and dorky. It's got to be a mix of all different groups with one key factor tying them all in: the virgin survivor girl. The flyby. He has to make his survivor girl think that she saw something in the shadows, something to rattle her nerves before the final conflict to come, to make her aware that there is a dark presence lurking about. The red herring. The first strike. She knows he's real now. He's killed someone not super close to her, but connected to her just enough that she now fears for her life. And of course, an Ahab.
We got an Ahab! Wow, we got an Ahab! What's an Ahab? It's a guy. It's a
The presence of pure good against the evil. Think Dr. Loomis. He usually knew the killer at some earlier point in their life, knew something was going to go down, and has been preparing to face him for a long time. All these factors, according to Leslie, are what build the legend of a true slasher icon. He himself is not supernatural the way the likes of Jason or Freddy are, so he works extra hard to make it seem as though he is. He's obsessed with escape artists. His cardio needs to be ridiculously on point so he can create that illusion that he can pace with his victims by walking while they're running their asses off, when in reality, he silently sprints closer and closer at insane speeds when they aren't looking. He also trains in the ability to control his breathing and bodily functions so he can appear to be dead if he needs to, using the aid of a hyperbaric chamber for practice. There are some other things I'd really like to get into as far as this movie goes, but it's got so many great twists and turns in it that I want it to be experienced firsthand by people that haven't seen it yet, and if this video piques their interest. Not a lot of people know about this film, and I aim to change that a bit. It's a great blend of satire and horror, and while everyone always seems to bring up Scream in that regard, Behind the Mask, The Rise of Leslie Vernon is always the one that comes to mind for me. Fantastic character, brilliant satire, and overall some great performances. In my opinion, Behind the Mask, The Rise of Leslie Vernon is a must-watch. The film came out during what I'm going to call the slasher revival. Horror had definitely begun to change in the later 90s and earlier 2000s. It was becoming found footage dominated, and whatever you want to call Saw and Hostel. I personally hate the term torture porn. It's too preachy, but I guess we can go with torture exploitation. That seemed to be becoming really marketable. Nowadays, it's either some ghost thing, or a creepy doll, or a creepy nun, or some other pee-pee poo-poo man. But then somewhere, in the middle of all of this, between 2004 and now, the slashers began sprouting up once again. Besides Behind the Mask, we started to see other potential franchise players getting into the slasher game, like Victor Crowley of the Hatchet films in 2006, and Chrome Skull of the Laid to Rest films in 2009. These three, in my opinion, are the best of this era. They belong right next door to Jason, Michael, and Freddy. A few others attempted to make their mark, like Max Seed in Uwe Boll's 2006 film Seed, which got a sequel in 2014, and the highly ambitious, though unfortunately highly craptacular, Orphan Killer in 2011. They were definitely aiming for something big with this, particularly with Leslie Vernon and Victor Crowley. Hatchet and Behind the Mask came out the same year, and feature a lot of similarities in weird places. Both feature Kane Hodder for one. Kane Hodder plays the titular role of Victor Crowley in Hatchet, and he appears as a cameo in Behind the Mask as Freddy Krueger's old neighbor in Elm Street. Now, you might be screaming, "Nostalgia pandering! Nostalgia pandering!" And to that I say, sit down and shut up. Look, it'd be one thing if it was literally Jason Voorhees himself, mask and all, living next to the Krueger house. But this was just a funny little nod. Only the die-hard fans are going to recognize that that's Kane Hodder, the guy who played Jason in New Blood, Jason Takes Manhattan, Jason Goes to Hell, and Jason X, and did the mocap for the recent Friday the 13th game. They don't fucking freeze the frame and go, "Hey kids, it's Kane Hodder!" You either recognize that it's him, or you don't, and I like that. They also flat out name drop the town of Glen Echo and Leslie Vernon himself in the first Hatchet film, during a conversation about local serial killers and urban legends and shit. I thought that was fucking great. That told us these two films exist in the same timeline, and that there was a potential for a crossover. I would love to see that shit too. The escape artist genius serial killer versus the brute strength undead slasher. It'd be like Freddy vs. Jason, but probably better. Robert Englund, Freddy friggin' Krueger himself, played the Ahab Dr. Loomis-esque character Doc Halloran, and he's absolutely fantastic in it. He brings an appropriate level of ham and genuine badassery to the role. It isn't exactly the way Donald Pleasence played Loomis, but it has that presence. He's very cocksure and matter-of-fact with a great dramatic flair. I love it. Horror character actor regular Zelda Rubinstein also makes a quick but fun appearance in the film during the red herring scene, showing our supposed virgin survivor girl character the story of Leslie Vernon via microfiche. Zelda has made appearances in pretty much everything Poltergeist related, and a whole fuckload of other stuff. Before acquiring distribution from Anchor Bay, Behind the Mask won several awards at several different indie film festivals, winning the Audience Choice Award for Best Feature Film at the Toronto After Dark Film Festival. Director Scott Glosserman launched an Indiegogo campaign in 2017 for a 6-part comic book sequel to Rise of Leslie Vernon, titled Behind the Mask: The Return of Leslie Vernon. I was kind of hoping we'd finally get a movie sequel, but this isn't bad either. I'm glad we finally got something because I greatly enjoy Leslie Vernon as a character and the lore surrounding him. I think Leslie Vernon needs a proper film sequel return though. I mean, we've got 2 Chrome Skull films with a 3rd in development and 4 Hatchet films. It's high time for Leslie Vernon to make his return from the apple orchard and strike fear into the hearts of Glen Echo once again. Monetary support, Patreon and merch, links in the description. More quality entertainment? Catch me on Radiodrome with Josh Hadley and Cecil from Good Bad Flicks on 1201beyond.com. And be sure to check out some of the other shows. Support badass synthwave artists like Perturbator on bloodmusic.com. You have everything to lose. I have everything to gain.
Psycho killer, esqueci.